"You're making a terrible mistake, Sarah. This company has been in our family for 3 generations." My father's eyes narrowed as he slid the acquisition offer across his mahogany desk, the same desk where I'd watched him build Northstar Logistics into the region's premier supply chain company. $5 million is an insult, he continued, his voice hardening. "I've already decided. Your brother takes over next month. He's been groomed for this his entire life." The familiar knot formed in my stomach. Not because I was losing a company I'd helped rebuild from near bankruptcy, but because after 15 years of sacrifice, innovative solutions, and quadrupling our annual revenue, I was still just Robert's daughter, rather than the executive who had saved their legacy. What happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for an entire industry that never saw us coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning began like any other at the Northstar Logistics headquarters in Portland. The sprawling industrial complex on the riverfront had been the hub of regional shipping operations since my grandfather founded the company in 1967. I arrived early, as was my habit, 6:15 a.m., precisely 2 hours before most of the administrative staff. The security guard nodded respectfully as I badged through the entrance. "Morning, Ms. Reynolds. Coffee's fresh in the executive kitchen." "Thanks, Eddie. How's your daughter doing at Portland State?" "Dean's List again," he beamed. "That scholarship program you started made all the difference." I smiled, genuinely pleased. The Employee Education Initiative had been my project, implemented over my father's initial objections about unnecessary overhead. 3 years later, it had reduced turnover by 32% and fostered remarkable loyalty throughout our workforce. My office occupied the northeast corner of the executive floor, smaller than my brother's, despite my senior title as Executive Vice President of Operations. Marcus had the larger space with the superior view, befitting his position as VP of Business Development, though he typically didn't arrive until after 9:30. The disparity never bothered me. I preferred function over status, efficiency over appearance. The morning's agenda was packed. We were finalizing an integration plan for the Peterson warehousing acquisition, a strategic expansion I'd orchestrated that would increase our storage capacity by 40% while establishing a critical foothold in the Seattle market. The deal represented 6 months of careful negotiation and due diligence, a complex transaction that even my father had reluctantly praised as solid business. At 9:45, my assistant Jennifer knocked on my doorframe. "Your father wants to see you," he said immediately. Something in her tone gave me pause. Jennifer had been with me for 7 years and could typically disguise any concern beneath professional efficiency. Today, her eyes betrayed unease. "Did he say what it's about?" "No, but Marcus went in 30 minutes ago. They're in the main conference room, not your father's office." A flutter of apprehension rippled through me. Conference room meetings with my father were rarely impromptu and never casual. I gathered my tablet and a notebook, took a steadying breath, and headed down the corridor. Through the glass walls, I could see my father standing at the head of the table, his posture commanding despite his 70 years. Marcus sat to his right, a position of symbolic significance not lost on me. More surprising were the other attendees. Bernard Williams, our longtime corporate counsel, Patricia Delaney, our CFO, and 2 men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. "Sarah, come in," my father said as I entered. "These gentlemen are from Apex Consolidated. I believe you've heard of them." My stomach tightened. Apex was one of the largest logistics conglomerates on the West Coast, a corporate behemoth known for aggressive acquisitions and ruthlessly efficient consolidation of family-owned operations like ours. "Mr. Reynolds has shared some preliminary information about your operations," said the older of the 2 men, extending his hand. "I'm Howard Mercer, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions. This is our chief counsel, James Thornton. I shook their hands mechanically, my mind racing to understand what was happening. Merger discussions? Acquisition talks? And why hadn't I been informed? Apex has expressed interest in purchasing Northstar, my father announced without preamble. I've invited them to present their initial offer. For a moment, I couldn't process his words. Sale discussions without involving the executive VP of operations? Without any prior discussion with the executive team? I glanced at Patricia, whose tight expression suggested she was equally blindsided. Mercer placed a bound presentation on the table. We've prepared an outline of our proposal. Apex is prepared to offer $68 million, contingent on standard due diligence. We would maintain the Portland facility as a regional hub and retain approximately 70% of current staff. 70%. The number landed like a physical blow. 300 loyal employees, nearly 1/3 of our workforce, casually marked for elimination before negotiations had even begun. This is the first I'm hearing of any interest in selling Northstar, I said carefully, looking directly at my father. What prompted this discussion? A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Business evolution, Sarah. The industry is consolidating. Better to negotiate from a position of strength than wait until we're forced to sell. We're not in a weak position, I countered. Q2 earnings were the strongest in company history. The Peterson acquisition gives us strategic advantage in the Seattle corridor. Our innovation investments are beginning to yield significant efficiency improvements. All factors that make this the right time to capitalize on our value, Marcus, though, interjected smoothly. He smiled at the Apex executives. My sister has always been passionate about operations. Sometimes she misses the bigger financial picture. The condescension in his tone was familiar. The same dismissive attitude he'd directed toward me since childhood, when he'd declare my carefully constructed block towers pretty good for a girl before knocking them down to build his own. The bigger picture is precisely what concerns me, I replied, maintaining professional composure despite the anger building inside me. Apex's integration model would dismantle the culture and relationships we've spent decades building. Their efficiency metrics prioritize short-term profit over sustainable business practices. This isn't evolution, it's erasure. My father's expression hardened. That's enough, Sarah. This meeting is to hear their proposal, not debate company direction. The decision ultimately rests with me as majority shareholder. And with the board, I reminded him. Our corporate structure required board approval for any transaction of this magnitude. A protective measure my grandfather had established specifically to prevent impulsive decisions. The board will follow my recommendation, he said with absolute certainty. Now, let's continue the presentation. For the next 40 minutes, I sat in stunned silence as Mercer outlined Apex's vision for dismantling everything we'd built. Their acquisition strategy was brutally efficient. Strip away redundant personnel, meaning people whose families I knew by name, consolidate vendors, destroying relationships I'd personally cultivated, and implement standardized processes, eliminating the customized service that distinguished us from competitors. When the presentation concluded, my father thanked the Apex executives and asked Bernard to escort them to the lobby. Once they departed, the conference room fell into heavy silence. This is a mistake, I finally said. We've worked too hard building this company to sell it for parts. No one said anything about selling for parts, Marcus objected. They're offering a premium valuation, 20% above market based on comparable acquisitions. Because they know our true value is higher, I countered. The Peterson integration alone will increase our EBITDA by 18% within 2 years. Our proprietary logistics software has transformative potential beyond our current operations. We're just beginning to realize the returns on our modernization investments. Speculative projections, my father dismissed. Apex offers certainty. Certainty of what? That hundreds of our employees lose their livelihoods? That our customers become account numbers in a corporate database? That the Reynolds name disappears from the industry within 6 months? The Reynolds name will be fine, my father said coldly. And speaking of the future, there's another matter to discuss. Marcus needs to focus on the Apex negotiations over the coming weeks. I've decided it's time to announce the succession plan. The shift in topic momentarily disoriented me. Succession plan? I'm 70 years old, Sarah. I won't be running Northstar forever. The board and I have agreed that Marcus will assume the role of president and CEO effective the 1st of next month. The words hit me like a physical blow. For 15 years, I'd worked 80-hour weeks transforming our outdated family business into a modern logistics powerhouse. I'd implemented the warehouse management system that reduced fulfillment errors by 84%. I'd restructured driver schedules to improve both efficiency and job satisfaction. I'd personally saved our 3 largest accounts when competitors tried to poach them with predatory pricing. "You're making Marcus CEO?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. He hasn't even completed the distribution center expansion project he promised would be finished last quarter. That project faced regulatory complications, Marcus interjected defensively. Complications I warned about before you broke ground, I reminded him. Complications that could have been avoided with proper planning. Enough, my father said sharply. This decision isn't about individual projects. It's about who's prepared to make difficult strategic decisions for the company's future. Marcus understands that business sometimes requires unsentimental choices. The implication was unmistakable. In my father's eyes, my commitment to our employees and customers, the very qualities that had driven our growth, were liabilities, rather than strengths. My sentimentality had quadrupled our revenue while maintaining the lowest turnover rate in the industry, but apparently that made me unfit for leadership. I see, I said quietly. And was I ever under consideration for the position? The uncomfortable silence that followed provided its own answer. Sarah, my father finally said, his tone softening slightly, you're an excellent operations executive. Your attention to detail and process improvements have been valuable. But leading this company through its next phase requires different qualities. Different qualities, I repeated, like being your son rather than your daughter? His expression hardened again. That's an unfair accusation. This decision is about capability, not gender. Then explain why I've never been given the opportunity to demonstrate those capabilities. Marcus has led exactly 2 major initiatives in the past 5 years. Both ran over budget and under-delivered. Meanwhile, I've executed 12 strategic projects that collectively increased our market share by 23%. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Numbers aren't everything, Sarah, Marcus said with infuriating condescension. Leadership is about vision and relationships. I've spent years cultivating connections with industry leaders and potential partners like Apex. Connections that apparently involve selling our family legacy to the highest bidder? My father stood abruptly. That's enough. I've made my decision. Marcus becomes CEO next month. The Apex offer will be presented to the board next week with my recommendation to proceed. If you can't support these directions, perhaps you should reconsider your position with the company. The threat wasn't subtle. Fall in line or leave. After 15 years of dedication and measurable success, my options were to accept my brother's unearned promotion and help dismantle the company I loved, or walk away from everything I'd built. I need some air, I said, rising from my chair. And some time to think. Take the rest of the day, my father suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't optional. We'll speak tomorrow after you've had time to process things. I walked out without another word, my mind already spinning with calculations and possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. By the time I reached my office, A plan was beginning to take shape, one that would require courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to risk everything I'd worked for. Jennifer looked up questioningly as I entered. "Everything okay?" "No," I answered honestly. "But it might be, eventually. I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. And I'll need copies of the Peterson acquisition files, all of them." "The originals are in your private server directory," she reminded me. "Yes, but I need physical copies. And I'll need the contact information for Elaine Davidson at First Meridian Bank." Jennifer's expression shifted from concern to understanding. She'd been with me long enough to recognize the significance of these requests. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "It's time. Just one more thing. Don't tell anyone I asked for these files. As far as anyone knows, I took my father's advice and went home to process things." "Understood." She hesitated, then added, "Whatever you're planning, I'm with you. Just so you know." Her loyalty brought a tightness to my throat. "Thank you, Jennifer. That means more than you realize." 3 hours later, I sat in my condominium overlooking the Willamette River, surrounded by documentation of everything I'd built at Northstar: operational innovations, client relationships, strategic expansions, and, most importantly, the people who had made it all possible. People who would soon be deemed redundant in the corporate language of acquisition. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, our CFO. "Just left emergency exec meeting. They're accelerating the timeline. Board presentation now Monday. Call me." So much for having time to process things. My father was moving quickly to prevent organized resistance. By this time next week, the deal would likely be approved. Marcus would become CEO of a company being prepared for corporate dismantling. 3 generations of building something meaningful would culminate in a transaction that benefited shareholders while abandoning everyone else who had contributed to our success. I took a deep breath and dialed Elaine Davidson's number. "Sarah." "Reynolds," she answered warmly. "It's been too long. How are things at Northstar?" "Actually, Elaine, that's why I'm calling. Do you still have those discussions every quarter about backing industry innovators?" "First Meridian's Innovation Fund. Absolutely. We just closed a round of funding last month. I'd like to schedule a meeting. Tomorrow, if possible. I have a proposition that might interest you." There was a pause. "This sounds intriguing. Does Richard know you're calling me?" "Richard, my father." "No," I admitted. "And I'd prefer to keep it that way for now. This is a personal venture." Another pause. "I see. How does 7:30 tomorrow morning sound?" "At the Riverside Club, not the bank." Fewer curious eyes. "Perfect. Thank you, Elaine." "Don't thank me yet," she cautioned. "But I'll admit I'm curious what could prompt Sarah Reynolds to step out of the family business. See you tomorrow." As I ended the call, I walked to the window overlooking the river. Vessels of all sizes navigated the waterway, from massive container ships to nimble personal watercraft. For generations, the Reynolds family had helped coordinate the movement of goods along this corridor, building relationships and systems that connected businesses across the region. Those relationships and systems existed in more than corporate documents. They existed in my mind, in my experience, in the trust I'd established with clients and employees alike. What my father and brother failed to understand was that Northstar's value wasn't primarily in its physical assets or even its contracts. The true value lay in the operational intelligence and human connections that made those assets productive. Assets that couldn't simply be acquired, they had to be earned. My phone buzzed again with a text from Marcus. "Dad says you overreacted. We're preserving the family legacy, just in a different form. Don't make this emotional." The message crystallized everything wrong with their perspective. In their view, preserving legacy meant extracting financial value while abandoning actual people. And of course, any objection I raised would be dismissed as emotional, rather than recognized as legitimate business concern. I didn't respond to his message. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting the business plan that would change everything. By midnight, I had outlined the framework for a new kind of logistics company, one built on the principles that had made Northstar successful, but optimized for the digital age and committed to the stakeholders my family was preparing to abandon. As dawn broke over the river, I finalized my presentation for Elaine. What I was proposing would require substantial investment and entail significant risk. It would mean walking away from the security of the family business and likely burning bridges with my father and brother. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose that transcended the frustration of being undervalued. My father had made his choice. Now I would make mine. And in 3 years' time, he would understand exactly what he had lost when he chose Marcus over me. The Riverside Club occupied the top 2 floors of the Heritage Tower, offering panoramic views of both the city skyline and the river that had shaped Portland's economic identity. At 7:25 the next morning, I stood in the elevator, dressed in a charcoal suit I reserved for high-stakes negotiations. The portfolio tucked under my arm contained not just a business plan, but a complete reimagining of regional logistics and my future. 42nd floor, announced the elevator's automated voice as the doors opened. The club's understated elegance was apparent immediately. Unlike newer establishments that showcased wealth through ostentation, the Riverside conveyed status through restraint. Natural materials, subdued lighting, and strategic sightlines created an atmosphere of quiet confidence. "Ms. Reynolds," the host greeted me. "Ms. Davidson is already seated in the river room. May I show you the way?" I followed him through the main dining area, where Portland's business elite conducted early morning meetings over locally sourced breakfasts and French press coffee. Several familiar faces nodded in recognition as I passed. As executive vice president of one of the city's oldest family businesses, I'd become a recognized figure in local business circles, though always introduced as Richard Reynolds' daughter, rather than by my accomplishments. Today, that would begin to change. Elaine Davidson rose as I entered the private dining alcove. At 63, she carried herself with the assurance of someone who had navigated decades of finance without surrendering her principles. Her silver hair was cut in a precise bob that framed shrewd eyes that had evaluated thousands of business proposals throughout her career. "Sarah," she smiled, extending her hand. "Prompt as always. I've ordered coffee and asked them to hold food service until we've had a chance to talk." "Thank you for meeting on such short notice," I replied, taking the seat across from her. The table was positioned to provide both privacy and a commanding view of the river below, where morning fog still clung to the water's surface. "Your call intrigued me," Elaine said, getting directly to business. "In 30 years of banking, I can count on one hand the number of times a Reynolds has sought financing outside family resources. What's changed?" I took a measured breath. "Everything is about to change at Northstar. My father is selling to Apex Consolidated. The announcement comes Monday." Elaine's expression registered genuine surprise. "Richard is selling? After all his talk about preserving the family legacy?" "The family name, perhaps, but not the business we've built. Apex will retain the brand temporarily while dismantling everything that makes Northstar effective. Meanwhile, my brother assumes the CEO position next month, primarily to facilitate the transition." "Marcus? Leading the company?" She couldn't entirely mask her skepticism. Elaine had witnessed enough of our family dynamics over the years to understand the situation's irony. "And you're being sidelined," I finished for her. "Offered the opportunity to help dismantle what I've spent 15 years building." Elaine absorbed this information, her fingers tapping lightly against her coffee cup. "I assume you're not here to voice complaints about family politics." "No," I confirmed, opening my portfolio. "I'm here because what Northstar is about. To discard represents tremendous unrealized value, value I intend to capture. For the next 40 minutes, I presented my vision for Horizon Logistics, a digital-first supply chain enterprise built around the proprietary software systems I'd developed at Northstar, but never been allowed to fully implement. I explained how advances in predictive analytics could transform traditional logistics, creating unprecedented efficiency while actually improving working conditions for drivers and warehouse personnel. The key innovation isn't the technology itself, I explained, showing her the flowcharts I'd developed. It's how the technology enables human-centered logistics. Our competitors, including what Northstar will become under Apex, are automating to eliminate people. My approach uses automation to empower people, creating better outcomes for everyone involved. Elaine studied the financial projections with the careful scrutiny of someone who had seen countless impressive-looking numbers prove illusory. These growth projections are aggressive. But achievable, I countered. I've included sensitivity analyses showing performance under conservative assumptions. Even the worst-case scenario generates positive cash flow by month 11. Assuming you secure the client base, she noted, Northstar's contracts will transfer to Apex. True, I acknowledged. But contracts and relationships aren't the same thing. I've personally managed our top 20 accounts for the past decade. Those relationships are built on trust, not legal documents. And you believe they'll follow you to a startup? Not immediately, I admitted. But within 18 months, after they experience Apex's corporate approach, at least 60% will be looking for alternatives. My model requires converting just 30% to exceed projections. Elaine closed the portfolio and studied me with unexpected intensity. Why logistics, Sarah? With your operational talents, you could pursue opportunities in numerous industries, many without directly competing against your family. The question penetrated deeper than she likely intended. Why was I choosing this difficult path? I could leverage my experience into a senior role at an established company, or pursue a completely different direction without the complications of family conflict. Because logistics isn't just moving things from point A to point B, I finally answered. It's the invisible infrastructure that connects communities and enables prosperity. When done right, it creates possibilities. Businesses grow, opportunities emerge, lives improve. When done wrong, it extracts value while leaving damage in its wake. I gestured toward the river below us. For 3 generations, my family has been part of building those connections. What Apex represents, what my father and brother are embracing, is the extraction mentality. They see logistics as financial equations, not human systems. I can't walk away knowing there's a better approach within reach. Elaine nodded slowly, a hint of approval in her expression. That's the answer I was hoping for. Passion without purpose rarely sustains a business through inevitable challenges. She signaled to a server who appeared with fresh coffee. After he departed, she continued. First Meridian's Innovation Fund typically invests $500,000 to $2 million in early-stage ventures with demonstrated market potential. Your proposal would be at the upper end of that range, requiring board approval. My heart sank slightly. Board processes meant weeks of evaluation, presentations, and deliberation, time I didn't have if I wanted to establish Horizon before the Apex acquisition was finalized. However, Elaine continued, there's another possibility. Our Strategic Opportunity Fund operates under different parameters. It allows for more substantial investments with accelerated approval when specific criteria are met. What criteria? I asked cautiously. Proven leadership, category expertise, and transformative potential, she listed. Your track record at Northstar checks the first 2 boxes definitively. As for transformative potential, she tapped my portfolio. This approach to logistics could certainly qualify, especially given the sustainable business model you're proposing. Hope flickered within me. What would this alternative path entail? A detailed presentation to the Strategic Investment Committee next Tuesday. 5 managing directors, including myself, with authority to approve up to $10 million in funding without full board review. The figure stunned me. My business plan had been built around securing $3 million in initial funding, followed by staged investments as growth milestones were achieved. $10 million would dramatically accelerate the timeline, allowing for immediate infrastructure development and talent acquisition. That would be, I paused, recalibrating my thinking, transformative. Elaine's expression became more serious. Before you get too excited, understand what you'd be undertaking. This level of investment comes with heightened expectations. We would require significant equity participation and performance benchmarks that, if missed, could result in management changes. I understand, I replied, my mind already adapting my plans to this new possibility. I'm prepared to be held accountable to results. There's something else, she added. Have you considered the personal ramifications? Richard has been a pillar of Portland's business community for decades. Creating a direct competitor will generate significant social and professional friction. Are you prepared for that? The question gave me pause. My father's influence extended throughout the region's business ecosystem. His disapproval could close doors, complicate partnerships, and trigger whisper campaigns questioning my loyalty and judgment. I've considered it, I acknowledged. But I've also considered the alternative, watching from inside as everything we've built is dismantled for short-term profit. If that means facing temporary friction to build something better, I'm willing to accept those consequences. Elaine studied me for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. Send me your complete business plan and financial models by end of day. I'll circulate them to the committee members and schedule the presentation for Tuesday at 2 p.m. Prepare for 3 hours of rigorous questioning. I'll be ready, I promised. As our meeting concluded, Elaine offered one final observation. You know, Sarah, I've known your father for 30 years. When you present your vision on Tuesday, I suspect I'll be seeing what Northstar could have become if Richard had recognized the leader sitting across from him all this time. Her words stayed with me as I left the Riverside Club. The validation from someone of Elaine's caliber reinforced my conviction that I wasn't merely reacting emotionally to being passed over. The path I was choosing represented genuine opportunity, not just for me, but for an industry ripe for transformation. My phone displayed 3 missed calls from my father, 2 from Marcus and 1 from Patricia. The message from Patricia read simply, "Board meeting now confirmed for Monday at 10 a.m. They're moving fast." I needed to move faster. Over the next 4 days, I operated in parallel universes. At Northstar, I maintained the appearance of a disappointed but resigned executive, attending meetings and providing requested information about ongoing operations. I even endured a painfully condescending lunch with Marcus, who assured me I would still have an important role during the transition, while explaining how Apex's approach would modernize our outdated processes. If he noticed my occasional smile at his pronouncements, he misinterpreted it as acceptance rather than recognition of how thoroughly he misunderstood both our business and my intentions. Meanwhile, every available moment outside the office was dedicated to refining my business plan and preparing for Tuesday's presentation. I contacted 3 key former employees who had left Northstar when my father rejected their innovation proposals. Talented individuals who understood both logistics and technology, and who had thrived elsewhere precisely because they shared my vision of human-centered systems. All 3 immediately expressed interest in joining my venture. "I've been waiting for something like this," said Michael Chen, a brilliant systems architect who had left Northstar 2 years earlier, after my father dismissed his integrated tracking platform as unnecessary complexity. "The industry needs disruption from someone who actually understands operations, not just financial engineering," observed Layla Davenport, our former client solutions director who had grown frustrated with the limitations placed on her customer-centric approach. By Sunday evening, I had secured provisional commitments from 8 former Northstar employees, each bringing specific expertise that would be essential for Horizon's success. Their enthusiasm confirmed what I had long suspected. The talent drain we'd experienced wasn't inevitable, but the direct result of leadership that failed to recognize and nurture innovation. Monday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed carefully for what would likely be my final board meeting at Northstar, choosing a navy suit that projected both professionalism and confidence. As I prepared to leave my condominium, I received a text from Jennifer. "Package arrived. It's in your office drawer." The package was my formal resignation letter, drafted with the assistance of an employment attorney who specialized in family business separations. It included carefully worded provisions protecting my intellectual property rights while acknowledging appropriate confidentiality obligations. The timing of its delivery was precisely calculated, available if needed today, but not discoverable before the board meeting. The Northstar headquarters seemed different as I drove into the executive parking area, not physically altered, but somehow diminished by the knowledge of what was about to happen. The building that had been the center of my professional life for 15 years would soon become just another corporate asset on Apex's balance sheet. As I walked toward the boardroom, Patricia intercepted me in the hallway. "Sarah? A moment?" We stepped into a small conference room where she closed the door before speaking. The deal terms changed over the weekend. Apex reduced their offer to $62 million. Citing integration complexities with the Peterson acquisition. I wasn't surprised. It's a standard negotiating tactic. They know my father is committed to the sale now, so they're extracting additional concessions. "That's not all," Patricia continued, her expression troubled. "The employment agreements have been modified. Guaranteed retention has been reduced from 3 years to 18 months for executive team members, except for Marcus, who maintains a 5-year contract as regional president." This detail was more concerning. "Have the workforce retention commitments changed as well?" Patricia nodded grimly. "Reduced from 70% to 60% in year 1, with no commitments beyond that. Nearly 400 families, their futures now even more uncertain. The very people whose efforts had built the company's value would be treated as disposable once that value was extracted. Does my father know about these changes?" "Yes," Patricia confirmed. "Marcus convinced him they're standard adjustments in transactions of this type. The board presentation has been updated accordingly." I thanked Patricia for the information and continued toward the boardroom, my resolve strengthening with each step. The meeting was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, but most attendees had already arrived. My father sat at the head of the table, reviewing documents with Bernard Williams. Marcus stood near the windows with 2 Apex representatives, laughing at some shared joke. I took my assigned seat silently, arranging my materials while observing the dynamics around me. The 7 board members, including my father as chairman, demonstrated varying levels of engagement. 2 were reviewing the presentation materials with apparent concern, while others engaged in casual conversation, suggesting their minds were already made regarding the transaction. At precisely 10 a.m., my father called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for accommodating this accelerated timeline. Today's agenda focuses on a significant opportunity for Northstar's future. Marcus will lead the presentation of Apex Consolidated's acquisition proposal, after which we'll open for discussion and vote on whether to proceed with the transaction." Marcus stepped forward with practiced confidence, launching into a presentation that described the Apex offer as a strategic partnership that preserves the Reynolds legacy while creating shareholder value. He highlighted the synergies and market opportunities without addressing the human costs or operational disruptions that would inevitably follow. When he reached the section on revised employment terms, he glossed over the reduced protections, With corporate euphemisms, adjusted retention parameters, and optimized organizational alignment. Several board members nodded along, either missing the implications or choosing to ignore them. I waited until the formal presentation concluded before raising my hand. My father acknowledged me with visible reluctance. "Sarah has a question." "Not a question," I clarified. "A statement for the record before discussion begins." My father's expression tightened, but he nodded permission. "The presentation we've just heard describes this transaction primarily in terms of financial metrics and market positioning," I began. "What it fails to adequately address are the operational implications and human impacts that will directly affect Northstar's performance and reputation." I turned to face the board members directly. The revised terms reduce employee protections while maintaining preferential treatment for select executives. They eliminate commitments to customers regarding service continuity. They abandon the Peterson acquisition strategy that this very board approved just 3 months ago as central to our growth plan. "Those strategies are being reconsidered. In light of market evolution," Marcus interjected. "Evolution?" I challenged. "Or extraction? This proposal isn't about evolving Northstar. It's about harvesting its value at the expense of everyone who helped create that value." One of the board members, Janet Hargrove, leaned forward. "Sarah raises valid concerns. The revised employment terms are significantly less favorable than what we initially discussed." "Business acquisitions require flexibility," my father responded. "Apex has provided assurances that valuable employees will be retained." Valuable. By whose definition? I asked. And for how long? "The documentation provides no binding commitments beyond the minimum legal requirements." For the next 30 minutes, I methodically highlighted the operational risks and ethical concerns embedded within the transaction. Several board members began asking increasingly pointed questions, particularly about the reduced purchase price and diminished employee protections. My father's frustration became increasingly visible as he realized the approval he had taken for granted might be in jeopardy. Finally, he attempted to redirect the discussion. "While these are interesting theoretical concerns, we need to focus on the fundamental question. Is this transaction in the best interest of Northstar's shareholders?" "Shareholders are only one stakeholder group," I countered. "What about our responsibilities to employees, customers, and the communities where we operate? The Reynolds family has always claimed to value more than just financial returns." "Sentimentality doesn't build sustainable businesses," Marcus argued. "Apex offers the scale and resources to compete in an evolving market." "Scale without purpose creates inefficiency, not value," I replied. "There are alternative approaches that preserve what makes Northstar effective while positioning us for future growth. I've outlined several in previous strategic discussions, proposals that were dismissed without serious consideration." My father's patience finally expired. "We've heard enough debate. The recommendation from management." He glanced at Marcus. "Deliberately excluding me from that definition is to proceed with the transaction. Unless there are new substantive questions, I suggest we move to a vote." Janet Hargrove raised her hand. "Before we vote, I'd like clarification on one point. Sarah, you mentioned alternative approaches. Given your role overseeing operations, what specific alternative would you recommend if the board were to reject this offer?" The question created the opening I needed, an invitation to articulate a different vision before the formal vote. My father recognized the danger immediately. "That's beyond the scope of today's discussion," he interjected. "We're evaluating a specific transaction, not hypothetical alternatives." "With respect, Richard, I believe it's directly relevant," Janet persisted. "If there are viable alternatives with potentially better outcomes, the board should consider them before making a decision of this magnitude." Other board members nodded in agreement, creating a moment of tension as my father weighed his options. Eventually, he yielded with visible reluctance. Briefly then, I seized the opportunity, outlining the core elements of what would become Horizon Logistics, the digital integration platform, the human-centered operational model, the strategic expansion opportunities. I deliberately avoided mentioning my separate discussions with First Meridian, instead positioning these ideas as an alternative direction for Northstar itself. As I spoke, I could see recognition dawning in my father's eyes, not just of my vision, but of my intention. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing me not as his daughter, or even as his employee, but as a business leader with a legitimate, competing perspective. When I finished, several board members were engaged in animated side conversations. Janet Hargrove was making notes with focused intensity. The Apex representatives exchanged concerned glances. My father moved quickly to regain control of the narrative. These are interesting concepts that might merit exploration in a different context. However, today we need to address the immediate opportunity before us. I call for a vote on the resolution to approve the acquisition proposal from Apex Consolidated as presented. The subsequent vote was closer than anyone had anticipated, 4 in favor, 3 opposed, but ultimately resulted in approval to proceed with the transaction. My father couldn't entirely mask his relief as he announced the outcome. Thank you, all for your thoughtful consideration. The management team will move forward with finalizing the transaction documents. We anticipate closing within 30 days, subject to regulatory review. As the meeting adjourned, board members gathered their materials and began filing out. I remained seated, waiting until the room had emptied except for my father, who lingered behind reviewing notes. "You almost derailed 3 months of negotiation," he said without looking up. "I presented legitimate concerns about a flawed transaction," I corrected. Concerns shared by nearly half the board. He finally met my gaze. "Your brother has worked hard to structure this deal. It secures the family's financial future while creating opportunities for continued influence in the industry. Marcus worked hard to sell a company he didn't build," I replied evenly, "and the only influence being preserved is his personal position." My father's expression hardened. This attitude is precisely why leadership requires more than operational expertise. Business decisions can't be clouded by emotional attachments to people or processes. "That's where we fundamentally disagree," I said, rising from my chair. "I believe the most successful businesses are built on precisely those attachments, not as sentimental indulgences, but as strategic advantages. Relationships create resilience. Loyalty drives performance. Purpose sustains momentum." I placed my resignation letter on the table between us. "Effective immediately, I'm resigning from Northstar Logistics." He stared at the envelope for a long moment before responding. "This is disappointment speaking, not reason. Take some time before making decisions you'll regret." "I've had 15 years to consider this decision," I replied calmly. "Every time my innovations were dismissed as unnecessary. Every time Marcus received credit for initiatives I developed. Every time you chose comfortable tradition over meaningful progress. Today simply confirmed what I've gradually accepted. My vision for logistics can't be realized within these walls." My father picked up the envelope, his expression unreadable. "And where will you go? Another established logistics firm would certainly value your operational experience." "No," I said simply. "I'm building something new." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're starting a competing company." "I'm creating the future of logistics," I corrected. "Whether that competes with what Northstar becomes under Apex will depend on choices you and Marcus make, not me." "This is a mistake, Sarah," he said, his voice hardening. "You're underestimating the challenges of building from scratch in an industry dominated by established players." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "or perhaps you're underestimating me, as you have consistently for 15 years. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Either way, we'll have our answer soon enough." As I walked through Northstar headquarters, For the final time, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for what might have been, concern for colleagues whose futures were now uncertain, but predominantly a growing sense of liberation. The constraints that had limited my vision for so long were falling away, creating space for something new to emerge. Jennifer was waiting beside my office, a small box of personal items already packed. Her efficiency wasn't surprising. Her next words were, "I've submitted my resignation as well," she said matter-of-factly. 2 weeks' notice, as required by policy. "Jennifer, you don't have to—" She raised a hand to stop me. "I've already accepted a position as operations director at a new logistics technology company. The founder is brilliant, if somewhat intense. I hear the work will be challenging, but meaningful." Despite everything, I smiled. The pay might be uncertain, at least initially. "I'll manage," she replied confidently. "Some opportunities are worth the risk." As we walked together toward the exit, employees watched with curious expressions. News traveled quickly in any organization, and my departure would trigger inevitable speculation. I maintained professional composure, knowing that how I left would communicate as much as why I left. In the parking garage, I paused beside my car, the modest sedan I'd chosen, despite my father's repeated suggestions that an executive should drive something more appropriate to her position. Another small act of independence that had irritated him without him ever understanding why it mattered to me. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., I confirmed with Jennifer. "The presentation materials should be finalized by then, and we'll have 6 hours to prepare for the meeting with First Meridian." She nodded. "I've booked the conference room at the downtown workspace as you requested. Michael, Layla, and Taylor have confirmed they'll join us at 11 to review the operational framework. My core team was already forming, talented people who shared my vision and were willing to take calculated risks to build something meaningful. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, the challenges felt invigorating rather than exhausting." As I drove away from Northstar headquarters, I didn't look back at the building that had been the center of my professional life. My focus was entirely forward, toward Tuesday's presentation, toward building Horizon Logistics, toward creating the future I'd always envisioned but never been permitted to pursue. My father and brother had chosen their path. Now I would show them the opportunities they had failed to recognize, not through argument or persuasion, but through the undeniable evidence of success. The downtown collaborative workspace represented everything Northstar had resisted becoming: adaptive, energetic, and unbounded by tradition. Located in a renovated industrial building, its exposed brick walls and reclaimed timber beams honored Portland's heritage, while its technological infrastructure and flexible design embraced future possibilities. For Horizon Logistics' first unofficial headquarters, it was perfect. I arrived early Tuesday morning, using the quiet hours to finalize my presentation for First Meridian's Strategic Investment Committee. Jennifer joined me at 9 as planned, bringing not just organizational support, but the perspective of someone who had witnessed both Northstar's strengths and limitations from a unique vantage point. "The financial projections are solid," she observed, reviewing the slides. "But the committee will want more detail on customer acquisition. How quickly can we realistically expect former Northstar clients to transition?" This was precisely why Jennifer had been my first recruitment priority. Her ability to identify critical questions before they emerged in high-stakes situations. "We'll face a contractual delay with most major accounts," I acknowledged. Northstar agreements typically include 6-month transition clauses with significant penalties for early termination. However, I pulled up a supplementary slide I'd prepared. 14 of our top 20 clients have contracts expiring within 18 months. 5 expire within the first year. "And you've maintained those relationships personally," Jennifer noted. "Yes, but we still need to prove ourselves operationally before they'll risk their supply chains on a startup," I cautioned. "That's Why the technology implementation timeline is critical. We can't just promise better integration. We need to demonstrate it immediately. For the next 2 hours, we refined the presentation, anticipating potential objections and strengthening. Key points. At 11, the core team began arriving. Michael Chen, our systems architect, Layla Davenport, client solutions specialist, Taylor Rodriguez, transportation operations expert. Each brought complementary expertise critical to Horizon's success. Before we dive into specifics, I began once everyone had settled around the conference table. I want to be absolutely clear about what we're undertaking. This isn't just another logistics company with incremental improvements. We're developing an entirely new operational model that prioritizes transparency, sustainability, and human-centered technology. The anti-apex, Taylor quipped, earning knowing smiles from the others. In essence, yes, I acknowledged, but our focus needs to be on what we're building, not what we're opposing. Our advantage isn't our perspective on Apex's weaknesses. It's our understanding of what logistics can become when technology serves people rather than replacing them. For the next 3 hours, we outlined Horizon's technological architecture and operational framework. Michael mapped the integration points between our proprietary software and existing industry systems. Layla identified the service gaps that would become our competitive advantage with specific clients. Taylor detailed how our driver experience model would attract and retain the industry's most experienced professionals, a crucial differentiation in a sector plagued by turnover. By mid-afternoon, our vision had evolved from conceptual to concrete, with defined responsibilities and clear developmental milestones. What had begun as my response to personal disappointment was transforming into something far more significant. A genuine opportunity to reshape regional logistics around principles that aligned profit with purpose. At 1:45, we gathered our materials and walked the 3 blocks to First Meridian Bank's headquarters. The contrast with our workspace was immediate: polished marble, hushed conversations, and carefully curated artwork projecting stability and tradition. As we crossed the lobby, I noticed Marcus emerging from an elevator, engaged in animated conversation with one of the bank's commercial lending officers. Our eyes met briefly across the atrium. His expression shifted from surprise to confusion, to sudden comprehension as he registered the presentation materials in my arms and the team accompanying me. Before he could approach, Elaine Davidson appeared from a side corridor. "Sarah, perfect timing," she greeted me, deliberately steering our group toward a different elevator bank. "The committee is assembled in the Executive Conference Center." As the elevator doors closed, she added quietly, "Your brother has been meeting with our commercial division regarding acquisition financing adjustments." Interesting timing. The implication was clear. The Apex deal was encountering complications requiring additional financial engineering. Whether this represented normal transaction evolution or deeper problems remained to be seen. The Strategic Investment Committee consisted of Elaine and 4 other senior executives, each responsible for different aspects of First Meridian's growth initiatives. They represented diverse backgrounds: traditional banking, venture capital, technology, and industrial operations, creating a comprehensive evaluation perspective. "Thank you for the opportunity to present our vision for Horizon Logistics," I began, once introductions were complete. "My colleagues and I believe logistics stands at a transformation point where technology, sustainability, and human experience converge to create unprecedented opportunity." For the next 40 minutes, I outlined Horizon's business model, emphasizing 3 key innovations: our proprietary integration platform that would seamlessly connect previously siloed systems, our driver-centered route optimization that improved both efficiency and quality of life, and our predictive inventory management that would reduce both costs and environmental impact for clients. The fundamental difference in our approach, I explained, displaying a comparison matrix, is that we view technology as an enabler of human potential rather than a replacement for human judgment. Our competitors are racing to eliminate people from their systems. We're designing systems that maximize what people do best while automating what machines do better. The committee's questions were predictably rigorous, focusing initially on financial projections and risk factors. How would we manage cash flow during the critical early phase before major clients could transition? What contingencies existed? If Northstar and Apex actively blocked our market entry, how would we attract essential talent without the resources of established competitors? With each question, a different team member took the lead in responding, demonstrating both our collective expertise and our collaborative approach. Michael detailed our phase technology implementation that would generate revenue through licensing even before our operational capacity was fully established. Layla explained our client acquisition strategy that targeted underserved mid-market companies before pursuing larger accounts. Taylor outlined our talent development program that would create advancement opportunities unavailable at larger firms, constrained by traditional hierarchies. Your operational model is compelling, acknowledged Raymond Torres, the committee, member with logistics industry experience. But successful execution requires substantial infrastructure investment before generating meaningful revenue. How do you address that fundamental tension? Through strategic sequencing, I responded, advancing to our implementation timeline. We're not attempting to replicate Northstar's physical infrastructure immediately. Instead, we're establishing targeted operational hubs in 3 key corridors where we've identified significant service gaps. Each hub becomes profitable within 60 days, then generates capacity for the next expansion phase. The questioning continued for nearly 2 hours, covering every aspect of our business model. Throughout the session, I observed Elaine carefully, documenting both our responses and her colleagues' reactions. While maintaining professional neutrality, she occasionally redirected questions toward areas we had prepared most thoroughly, subtly maximizing our opportunity to demonstrate our readiness. Finally, Walter Griffith, the committee chair, closed his portfolio. Thank you for a comprehensive presentation. You've clearly developed this concept with exceptional thoroughness. The committee will review the materials and discuss internally. Elaine will communicate our decision by tomorrow afternoon. As we gathered our materials, Elaine approached quietly. Impressive performance, she murmured. Particularly given your timeline constraints. Wait for my call tomorrow before making any other moves. We thanked the committee and departed, maintaining professional composure until we reached the street, outside. Only then did the tension break, with Michael letting out a long exhale. That was the most intense presentation I've ever been part of, he admitted. Like defending a dissertation to people who control your entire future. They asked exactly the right questions, Layla observed. Which means they're taking us seriously. Now we wait, Jennifer said, checking her watch. 24 hours until we know whether Horizon officially exists or remains a compelling concept. Horizon already exists, I corrected her gently. Whether First Meridian funds us or not, we're building this company. Their decision determines our timeline and scale, not our existence. We returned to the workspace to debrief, analyzing the committee's questions for insights into their priorities and concerns. While the others focused on technical and operational aspects, my thoughts kept returning to the glimpse of Marcus in the bank lobby. By now, he would have reported the encounter to our father. They would be speculating about my intentions, perhaps even attempting to counter whatever they imagined I was planning. My phone confirmed this suspicion when it displayed my father's name on the screen later that evening. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided direct communication was preferable to speculation. Hello, Dad. Sarah. His voice carried its familiar, authoritative tone, though with an undercurrent of uncertainty he rarely displayed. I understand you had meetings at First Meridian today. I did, I confirmed without elaborating. A pause followed, as he waited, for details I didn't offer. Marcus mentioned you weren't alone. Something about a presentation to their investment division. That's correct. Another pause, longer this time. I think we should discuss whatever you're planning. Perhaps over dinner? The Riverside Club has a table available at 8. The invitation was unexpected, not because my father avoided difficult conversations, but because he rarely initiated them outside his controlled environments. The Riverside Club represented neutral territory where public civility would be required of both of us. I appreciate the invitation, I replied carefully. But I'm in the middle of something that can't be interrupted. Perhaps next week, after things have settled. Sarah, his voice took on an edge of impatience. If you're pursuing what I think you are, there are complications you may not have considered. Family businesses require certain courtesies, even during disagreements. The irony of his sudden concern for courtesy wasn't lost on me. I understand courtesies, Dad. I also understand decisions and consequences. You and Marcus made decisions about Northstar's future without meaningful consultation. I've made decisions about my future with the same independence. This isn't about independence, he countered. It's about responsibility to a legacy larger than individual ambitions. The legacy argument works both ways, I observed. I'm honoring the entrepreneurial legacy that grandfather established when he built something from nothing. He didn't inherit a company. He created one by identifying unmet needs and developing innovative solutions. I'm following his example, not abandoning it. My father's silence suggested this perspective hadn't occurred to him. When he finally spoke again, his tone had moderated slightly. At least tell me what you're planning. Professional courtesy, if not family consideration. When there's something concrete to discuss, you'll be among the first to know, I assured him. Until then, I suggest focusing on your current transaction. I understand there are financing adjustments being negotiated? His sharp intake of breath confirmed that Marcus had updated him about our encounter at the bank. Standard procedural matters, he dismissed. The Apex acquisition remains on schedule. Good to hear, I replied neutrally. I should go. My team is waiting. I'll reach out next week about that dinner. After ending the call, I rejoined the others, who had transitioned from debriefing to brainstorming potential office locations. For when funding was secured, their confidence was encouraging, though I maintained more cautious optimism. First Meridian's decision would shape our immediate future, but it wasn't the only factor that would determine Horizon's ultimate success. The call from Elaine came, earlier than expected the following day, 10:17 a.m. according to my phone display. Sarah, are you somewhere you can speak privately? I moved to a quiet corner of the workspace. Yes, I'm alone. The committee has reached a decision regarding Horizon Logistics, she began, her tone professionally neutral. After thorough review of your proposal and consideration of market conditions, we've determined that the opportunity aligns with our Strategic Opportunity Fund parameters. My breath caught. That means First Meridian is prepared to offer initial funding of $5 million structured as preferred equity with performance-based conversion options. She paused before adding, this represents significant confidence in both your business model and leadership capabilities. Relief and excitement flooded through me, though I maintained professional composure. That's excellent news, Elaine. Thank you. The committee's confidence is deeply appreciated. There are conditions, she continued. 3 board seats for First Meridian representatives, quarterly performance reviews against established metrics, and a phased funding schedule tied to specific milestones. All reasonable, I agreed. These were standard accountability measures for investments of this magnitude. There's one more thing, Elaine added. Not a condition, but a disclosure. Northstar's acquisition financing through our commercial division has encountered complications. Apex has reduced their offer again, citing customer retention concerns. Following your departure, the transaction remains viable but on less favorable terms for Northstar's shareholders. The information wasn't entirely surprising but carried significant implications. Apex recognized that my departure represented material risk to Northstar's value, validation of what my father and brother had repeatedly dismissed. That's valuable context, I acknowledged. Will it affect our arrangements in any way? Not directly, Elaine assured me. The Strategic Opportunity Fund operates independently from commercial lending. However, you should be prepared for heightened sensitivities given First Meridian's relationships with both enterprises. Understood. When can we proceed with documentation? Legal teams are preparing paperwork now. We should have everything ready for signatures by Friday, she replied. In the meantime, I suggest accelerating your implementation preparations. Once funding transfers, market expectations will become immediate. After the call ended, I took a moment to absorb what had just occurred. After 15 years of operating within constraints defined by others, I now had both the resources and the autonomy to build something aligned with my vision. The opportunity was exhilarating and sobering in its responsibility. When I shared the news with the team, their reactions reflected the significance of the moment. Jennifer immediately began organizing implementation priorities. Michael pulled up his technical architecture diagrams, ready to transform concepts into functional systems. Layla started drafting client outreach strategies. Taylor began calculating equipment and personnel requirements for our initial operational hubs. This changes everything, Michael observed, his expression both excited and daunted. Concept to execution in days rather than months. It accelerates our timeline, I agreed, but doesn't change our fundamentals. The same principles that defined our vision still guide our implementation. We're just moving from potential to actual sooner than anticipated. Over the next 3 days, our core team expanded to 14 key personnel, all exceptional professionals who shared our vision for logistics transformation. Many came from Northstar, having experienced firsthand the limitations of traditional approaches. Others brought diverse expertise from technology, sustainability, and customer experience sectors, creating a multidisciplinary foundation for innovation. We secured temporary headquarters in a recently renovated building near Portland's technology corridor, with flexible space that could accommodate our initial team while allowing for planned expansion. Equipment orders were placed, software development environments established, and recruitment processes initiated for operational personnel. By Friday morning, when I met with First Meridian's legal team to execute the funding documents, Horizon Logistics had transformed from concept to nascent reality. As I signed the final agreement, Elaine offered a handwritten note along with her formal congratulations. Your grandfather would recognize his spirit in what you're building, it read. Some legacies are defined not by continuation but by regeneration. Her words captured precisely what I had struggled to articulate to my father. That honoring legacy sometimes requires reimagining rather than merely preserving. William Reynolds had built Northstar by recognizing that post-war logistics required new approaches. I was following his example by recognizing that digital-era logistics demanded similar reinvention. The funding transfer was completed by midday. By evening, Horizon Logistics had a functioning bank account, official corporate registration, and contractual commitments from our core team members. What had begun as a response to rejection had evolved into something far more significant, a genuine opportunity to create the future I had always envisioned. That evening, as the team celebrated this milestone at a local restaurant, I stepped outside to make a call I had been considering all day. My father answered on the second ring. Sarah. His tone suggested he had been expecting my call. The dinner you suggested, I began without preamble. Is that offer still open? A brief pause followed. Yes, of course. When would you like to meet? Tomorrow evening, if you're available. There are developments we should discuss directly rather than through industry channels. Developments? He repeated carefully. Related to your meetings at First Meridian? Among other things, I confirmed. I believe in professional courtesy, especially with family. Another pause. Longer this time. Tomorrow at 7, then. I'll make the reservation. Thank you. And Dad? This works better as a conversation between us. Just you and me. His hesitation was palpable. Marcus has been heavily involved in the acquisition process. His perspective could be valuable. This isn't about the acquisition, I clarified. It's about what comes after, for both of us. I see, he replied, though his tone suggested uncertainty. Just the two of us, then. After ending the call, I rejoined the celebration, where animated conversations about Horizon's future filled the table. The contrast between their forward-focused enthusiasm and the backward-looking concerns that dominated Northstar couldn't have been more striking. Here, innovations weren't threats to established patterns, but opportunities for improvement. Questions weren't challenges to authority, but invitations for collaboration. The next evening, I arrived at the Riverside Club precisely at 7, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress that projected confidence without ostentation. My father was already seated at a corner table offering both privacy and a view of the river below. He stood as I approached, his expression a careful neutral. "You look well," he observed as we settled into our seats. "Energized." "I am," I acknowledged. "Building something meaningful has that effect." A server appeared with water and menus, then discreetly withdrew after taking our drink orders. Once we were alone, my father leaned forward slightly. "I understand. Congratulations are in order." First Meridian's Strategic Opportunity Fund makes investments only in exceptional circumstances. The information network of Portland's business community was as efficient as ever. "Thank you. Their confidence is validating. Especially given the substantial capitalization," he continued. $8.5 million is significant initial funding for a logistics startup." The precision of his information was mildly surprising, but not entirely unexpected. In a community where financial relationships intertwined across institutions, confidentiality had practical limitations. "Horizon represents more than a typical startup," I replied. "We're developing solutions for systemic industry challenges that established players have ignored or exacerbated." His expression remained carefully neutral. "Including Northstar?" "Including what Northstar is becoming under Apex," I specified. "The company you and grandfather built was never just another logistics provider. It succeeded precisely because it prioritized relationships alongside transactions. That distinction is being erased in the current transition." Markets evolve, Sarah. Consolidation is inevitable in maturing industries. "Consolidation doesn't require commoditization," I countered. "There's substantial market opportunity in humanizing supply chains rather than further mechanizing them. That's Horizon's fundamental proposition." Our conversation paused as the server returned with drinks and took our dinner orders. Once we were alone again, my father studied me with an intensity I recognized from childhood, the evaluative gaze he employed when reassessing a situation. "You've assembled quite a team," he observed. "Several of Northstar's most talented former employees. I assume that's not coincidental." "It's natural alignment," I explained. "Talented people who left Northstar did so because their innovations were consistently undervalued or actively discouraged. Horizon offers what they couldn't find within traditional structures: opportunity to apply their expertise toward meaningful transformation." My father sipped his scotch thoughtfully. "And you believe this transformation justifies directly competing with the company that developed your expertise? That funded your education and provided your professional platform?" The question wasn't unexpected, though its framing revealed much about his perspective. "Northstar didn't give me anything, Dad. I earned my position through 15 years of measurable contribution. The operational improvements I implemented generated far more value than any investment the company made in my development." That contribution occurred within a system that provided necessary structure and resources, he argued. Independent. Success is more challenging than you realize. I don't underestimate the challenges, I assured him, but I recognize opportunities precisely because I understand operational realities that purely financial perspectives miss. Horizon isn't competing with Northstar's past. It's addressing gaps created by Northstar's future direction under Apex. Our meals arrived, temporarily shifting conversation to neutral topics. We discussed Portland's development projects, mutual acquaintances, and even shared memories of my grandfather, safe territory that allowed necessary respite from the underlying tension. As dessert was served, however, my father returned to his central concern. The Apex acquisition has encountered complications, he acknowledged, his expression tightening. Your departure created unexpected challenges with key accounts. Several have indicated reluctance to transition to the new operational model without your involvement. This wasn't entirely surprising, but represented significant validation. Those relationships were built on trust and consistent delivery over many years. Clients recognize that Apex's approach prioritizes financial engineering over operational excellence. Perhaps, he conceded reluctantly. Regardless, Marcus has been working to address these concerns. The transaction remains viable, though on adjusted terms. I'm glad to hear it, I responded sincerely. Despite our differences, I never wished for Northstar's diminishment. Only the opportunity to build something that better reflects where logistics should be heading. My father studied me for a long moment before asking the question that had likely prompted this dinner invitation. What are your intentions regarding Northstar's client relationships? Professional integrity and legal compliance, I answered. Directly. Horizon won't violate contractual obligations or solicit current clients under exclusive agreements. We will, however, be available when those agreements expire or when clients independently seek alternatives. That's more reasonable than I anticipated, he admitted. Did you expect scorched earth tactics? I asked, genuinely curious about his perception. I expected the passion that drives your operational excellence might extend to competitive positioning, he replied carefully, particularly given the circumstances of your departure. My passion is for building, not destroying, I clarified. Horizon represents opportunity to implement innovations that Northstar consistently rejected. Our success doesn't require Northstar's failure, though Apex's approach might create that outcome regardless of our actions. My father's expression suggested this perspective hadn't occurred to him. For perhaps the first time, he was considering that my decisions might be driven by constructive vision rather than reactive emotion or competitive animus. As our evening concluded, he offered a reluctant acknowledgement. Your grandfather faced similar resistance when he first proposed regionalizing what had been a local cartage operation. The board thought he was overreaching. Established competitors dismissed him as naive. I remember his stories, I nodded, recognizing the significance of this parallel. He said the best business opportunities often look like unnecessary complications to those comfortable with existing patterns. Until they become obvious in retrospect, my father completed the familiar saying. After a thoughtful pause, he added, I underestimated your commitment to your vision, Sarah. That miscalculation is proving costly for Northstar. The statement, the closest he had ever come to acknowledging my value, carried both recognition and regret. Rather than press the advantage, I offered reconciliation. We're building different futures now, Dad. Time will reveal which approach better serves the industry's needs. In the meantime, perhaps we can maintain professional respect despite our divergent paths. He nodded slowly. That seems appropriate, though I suspect Marcus will find the situation more challenging to navigate. Marcus has never lacked confidence in his perspective, I observed diplomatically. I'm sure he'll adapt as circumstances require. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, my father extended his hand in a formal gesture that felt simultaneously distant and meaningful. Good luck with Horizon, Sarah. The logistics industry could benefit from thoughtful disruption, regardless of its source. Thank you, I replied, accepting both the handshake and the limited blessing it represented. I hope Northstar finds its proper place in whatever emerges from the current transition. Driving home that evening, I reflected on how dramatically circumstances had changed in just 2 weeks, from executive without authority to founder with substantial resources, from implementing others' limited vision to manifesting my own expansive one. From proving my value within artificial constraints to creating a system where value could be recognized without prejudice or preconception. The road ahead would be challenging. Building any significant enterprise required overcoming substantial obstacles. But for the first time, those challenges represented opportunities for growth rather than artificial limitations on potential. Horizon wasn't just a company. It was a canvas for creating the future of logistics I had always envisioned, but never been permitted to pursue. As my grandfather had often said, sometimes the most important journeys begin with doors closing rather than opening. The door to Northstar's leadership had closed definitively, not through my choices, but through my father's and brother's decisions. But that closing had created the necessary space for something new to emerge, something potentially more significant than what had been lost. Horizon Logistics was no longer a response to rejection. It was the beginning of transformation, not just for me, but for an industry ready for meaningful change. Horizon Logistics' first headquarters embodied our fundamental philosophy: adaptive, efficient, and purposefully designed for human experience. Unlike Northstar's imposing corporate campus with its hierarchical layout and closed-door offices, our space featured collaborative workstations arranged around shared resources, transparent meeting areas, and technology integrated to serve rather than separate. Even the location reflected our values: a renovated waterfront warehouse that honored Portland's industrial heritage while embracing contemporary needs. 3 weeks after securing funding, our core team had expanded to 32 professionals representing diverse backgrounds and perspectives. Former Northstar employees worked alongside logistics innovators recruited from competitors, technology specialists from outside the industry, and sustainability experts who helped ensure our systems optimized both economic and environmental outcomes. This deliberate cross-pollination of expertise created daily innovation that would have been impossible within traditional siloed departments. The integration platform passed all preliminary testing protocols, Michael announced during our morning leadership meeting. We're ready to begin client demonstrations next week, 3 days ahead of schedule. This represented a critical milestone. Our proprietary software platform, the Horizon Intelligence System, would provide the technological foundation for our operational model. Unlike legacy systems cobbled together through acquisition and compromise, SHIZ had been designed as a unified ecosystem where information flowed seamlessly between previously disconnected functions. That's excellent progress, I acknowledged. How are we positioned for the Peterson implementation? The Peterson warehouse acquisition, the same expansion I had orchestrated at Northstar, had become a strategic opportunity for Horizon. When Apex reduced their purchase offer for Northstar, my father had been forced to seek alternative financing for the transaction. Facing pressure from shareholders and board members concerned about declining valuation, he had ultimately decided to divest certain non-core assets to preserve the main acquisition. Peterson's Seattle facilities had been designated for sale rather than integration. We're prepared to submit our formal proposal tomorrow, Layla confirmed. Financial modeling shows it's viable within our current capitalization, especially with the synergies between their warehousing capabilities and our technology platform. Peterson's executive team is receptive, Taylor added. They've experienced Apex's approach with other acquisitions and prefer maintaining operational independence with strategic partnership. And the legal parameters? I asked, conscious. of potential complications given my previous involvement with the transaction at Northstar. Completely clean, Jennifer assured me. Your non-compete specifically excludes transactions Northstar abandons or divests. This qualifies under both provisions. First Meridian's legal team has reviewed and confirmed our position. The Peterson opportunity represented more than additional capacity. It would establish Horizon's physical presence in the Seattle market months ahead of our original timeline, creating credibility that would accelerate client acquisition across the region. The irony that this opportunity emerged directly from my father and brother's decisions wasn't lost on any of us, though we focused on its strategic value rather than the vindication it represented. Let's proceed with the proposal, I decided, but emphasize the partnership aspects rather than framing it as an acquisition. Peterson's operational expertise complements our technological innovation. This should be collaborative integration, not corporate absorption. The distinction reflected Horizon's fundamental approach to growth, building connections rather than simply accumulating assets. Where traditional logistics companies expanded through dominance and standardization, we would expand through collaboration and customization, preserving what worked while enhancing what could be improved. As our meeting concluded, Jennifer remained behind with an update that couldn't be shared with the broader team. Marcus has been reaching out to our key personnel, she reported. 3 engineers and our lead operations analyst received direct calls offering significant salary increases to return to Northstar. This wasn't entirely surprising. As Horizon's operational capabilities became increasingly visible, Northstar and Apex would naturally attempt to slow our momentum through various competitive tactics. Talent poaching represented a rational, if somewhat desperate, response to the threat we posed. Were any tempted by the offers? I asked. Jennifer's expression conveyed both amusement and satisfaction. Quite the opposite. Drew Jackson, the operations analyst, told Marcus he wouldn't return to Northstar's environment for twice the money. Apparently, the conversation became rather heated. While I took no pleasure in Marcus's frustration, the team's loyalty validated our cultural approach. People weren't staying at Horizon merely for compensation or career advancement. They were committed to building something they believed in, a logistics ecosystem that valued their contributions and aligned with their principles. Let's acknowledge their loyalty without dramatizing the situation, I suggested. Perhaps accelerate the implementation of the equity participation program we've been discussing. People should share in the value they're helping create, especially when they're demonstrating such commitment. I'll have the formal proposal ready by Monday, Jennifer confirmed. The following weeks brought accelerating progress across all aspects of Horizon's development. The Peterson partnership was finalized, establishing our Seattle operational hub and expanding our warehousing capacity by 40%. Our proprietary software platform moved from testing to implementation, with initial clients reporting efficiency improvements exceeding our projections. Our driver experience model attracted seasoned professionals from across the industry, many bringing established relationships that enhanced our service capabilities. Most significantly, clients began transitioning to Horizon as their Northstar. Contracts permitted. The first was Northwest Pharmaceutical Distributors, a mid-sized but strategically important account I had personally maintained for 7 years. When their agreement with Northstar expired in May, they conducted comprehensive evaluations of available options before selecting Horizon for their regional distribution needs. Your technology integration provides visibility we've never had before, their operations director explained during implementation. But what ultimately convinced us was your people-centered approach. Our previous logistics partners treated our products as anonymous packages. You understand they're essential medications that impact lives. This validation of our fundamental philosophy, that effective logistics required both technological excellence and human understanding, provided powerful momentum. 3 more pharmaceutical distributors followed Northwest's example. creating a specialized vertical market where Horizon quickly established leadership. Similar patterns emerged in sustainable products, specialty foods, and technical equipment sectors, areas where logistics quality directly impacted product integrity and customer experience. By our third month of operation, Horizon had secured 17 active clients, established operational hubs in Portland and Seattle, and implemented our technology platform across all service areas. Revenue growth exceeded our projections by 23%, while operational costs remained within 5% of budget targets. Most importantly, client satisfaction metrics reflected exceptional performance, with 0 service failures across more than 2,000 shipments. This early success attracted attention beyond our immediate market. Industry publications featured articles about our innovative approach. Technology forums invited our team to present on systems integration. Sustainability organizations recognized our reduced carbon footprint methodologies. What had begun as a regional response to personal setback was evolving into a model with potential national implications. It also attracted intensified attention from Northstar and Apex. Their combined enterprise, now operating as Northstar Apex Logistics, initiated aggressive pricing strategies targeting our client sectors. They accelerated technology investments in apparent response to our innovations. They increased recruitment efforts focused on logistics professionals with digital experience similar to our team profiles. Most pointedly, they launched a marketing campaign emphasizing their established reliability compared to unproven startups, a transparent attempt to create uncertainty about Horizon's stability. The campaign never mentioned us by name, but incorporated visual elements and terminology that clearly referenced our brand positioning. "They're feeling the pressure," Layla observed during our strategic review meeting. "These responses require significant resource allocation that wasn't in their integration plan." "The timing is particularly challenging for them," Taylor added. "They're simultaneously trying to standardize operations across legacy systems while developing new capabilities to counter our advantages. That's extraordinarily difficult to execute effectively." "It's not personal," I reminded the team. "It's rational competitive response. We represent a legitimate threat to their market position, particularly in high-value segments. We should expect continued escalation as our impact grows." "Speaking of impact," Michael interjected, "the client transition projections need updating. We're seeing acceleration beyond our original models, particularly among mid-sized accounts with contracts expiring in the next quarter. This accelerated transition created both opportunity and challenge. Each new client required careful implementation to ensure our service quality remained consistent. Rapid growth demanded infrastructure expansion that had been planned for later stages. Most critically, it required maintaining our cultural cohesion as new team members joined at an increasing rate. "We need to ensure our hiring priorities align with growth requirements," I noted. "Technical capabilities matter, but cultural alignment is equally essential. Every new team member should understand that we're building more than service capacity. We're creating a fundamentally different logistics model." As we addressed these growth considerations, Jennifer interrupted with breaking news. "Peterson's CEO just called. Northstar Apex has withdrawn from the Seattle expansion project entirely. They're focusing exclusively on Portland operations and liquidating regional facilities that don't align with their centralized model." This development carried significant implications. The Seattle corridor represented critical infrastructure connecting Pacific shipping with inland distribution. By abandoning their presence there, Northstar Apex was effectively conceding an entire geographic segment to competitors, including Horizon. "They're consolidating to preserve margin," I analyzed. "Classic Apex strategy, sacrifice growth potential for immediate profitability. It creates substantial opportunity for us if we can scale our Seattle operations quickly enough to capture the clients they're abandoning. The Peterson partnership gives us operational foundation," Taylor confirmed. But we'd need additional capacity within 60 days to handle projected volume. What about the Harrison facility? Michael suggested. It's been vacant since Trans-Pacific downsized last year. Location is ideal for Northern Corridor access. Acquisition cost would exceed our current capital allocation model, Jennifer cautioned. But leasing with option provisions might work, especially if we accelerate the second funding round discussions with First Meridian. The strategic opportunity was compelling but required careful evaluation. Expanding too quickly could compromise our service quality or financial stability. Moving too slowly would allow other competitors to capture market share. Northstar Apex was surrendering. The decision required balancing immediate opportunity against sustainable growth principles. Let's develop comprehensive analysis by Monday, I decided. Financial modeling, operational implementation requirements, and client acquisition projections. If the opportunity is as significant as it appears, we should be prepared to move quickly while maintaining our fundamental standards. As the team dispersed to begin this analysis, my phone displayed an unexpected caller. Richard Reynolds, my father. Dad, I answered, moving to a private space. This is a surprise. Sarah. His voice carried uncharacteristic tension. I believe we should meet. There are developments you should be aware of regarding Northstar Apex's strategic direction. The formal phrasing suggested he was not alone during this call. I see. When would you suggest? This evening, if possible. The usual location. I'll be there at 7, I confirmed before ending the call. The usual location meant the Riverside Club, neutral territory where business could be discussed with appropriate discretion. His urgency suggested significant developments beyond the Seattle withdrawal we had just learned about. Whether this represented threat or opportunity remained to be seen. I arrived at the Riverside Club precisely at 7, finding my father already seated at what had become our table overlooking the river. His expression reflected complex emotion, tension, resignation, and something resembling reluctant respect. Thank you for coming, he began as I took my seat. I apologize for the abbreviated notice. No apology necessary, I assured him. Your message suggested urgency. He nodded, then proceeded directly to purpose. The Apex acquisition has encountered substantive complications. Integration challenges have proven more significant than projected, particularly regarding client retention in specialized sectors. This confirmed what we had observed indirectly through market intelligence. I understand you've withdrawn from the Seattle expansion. That represents substantial strategic adjustment. More than adjustment, he acknowledged. The board has instructed management to implement comprehensive restructuring. Regional operations are being consolidated to preserve core business segments. Non-essential assets are being divested to improve liquidity. The implications were significant. Apex's standardization model isn't working as projected. The model has merit, my father defended reflexively before moderating his position. But implementation failed to account for relationship factors in certain market segments. Specialized clients require specialized approaches. This represented remarkable acknowledgement from someone who had dismissed such considerations during our previous discussions. And Marcus? How is he navigating these challenges? A flicker of emotion crossed my father's face, disappointment tempered with paternal protection. Marcus has transitioned to external relations responsibilities. Operational oversight has been reassigned to Apex's integration team. In corporate terminology, this represented significant demotion, removing my brother from substantive decision-making while preserving titular authority. The outcome wasn't surprising given the circumstances, but I took no satisfaction in his professional setback. I'm sorry to hear that, I offered sincerely. Transitions of this nature are challenging for everyone involved. My father studied me carefully, perhaps searching for hidden satisfaction at his son's diminishment. Finding none, He continued with his primary purpose. The restructuring creates certain opportunities that might interest Horizon, specifically, the specialized transportation division serving pharmaceutical and medical technology clients. This disclosure was unexpected. The specialized division represented Northstar's highest margin business segment, one I had personally developed over 7 years of relationship building and customized service design. For Northstar Apex to consider divesting this operation suggested financial pressure beyond what industry observers had recognized. That's a surprising development, I acknowledged. The specialized division has consistently delivered exceptional performance. Performance isn't the concern, my father clarified. Integration compatibility is the issue. Apex's standardized protocols cannot effectively accommodate the customization these clients require. Rather than compromise quality and lose the business entirely, they've determined strategic divestiture to a specialized provider represents optimal resolution. And you're approaching Horizon as a potential acquirer. As the most appropriate potential acquirer, he corrected. These clients require distinctive operational approach aligned with Horizon's demonstrated capabilities. Their satisfaction, metrics under your new enterprise exceed previous benchmarks at Northstar, despite your limited operational history. The validation of our approach wasn't lost on me, though I maintained professional focus on the business implications. This would represent substantial transaction for an enterprise at our developmental stage. First Meridian has indicated provisional support for appropriate expansion opportunities, my father noted, revealing his awareness of our banking relationship. Their confidence in Horizon's model appears robust. Financial capacity is one consideration, I acknowledged. Integration complexity is equally significant. We've built our operational model around specific principles and technologies. Absorbing external operations requires careful alignment to maintain service standards. Understandable concerns, my father agreed. However, the specialized division was largely designed according to your operational frameworks during your Northstar tenure. The foundational compatibility should mitigate integration challenges. He was right. The specialized division had been my most significant achievement at Northstar, the one operational area where I had been granted sufficient authority to implement my complete vision for logistics excellence. Its systems, personnel, and culture already aligned closely with Horizon's approach because they shared common origins in my operational philosophy. The division's client relationships would transfer completely? I asked, considering potential complications. All existing contracts would convey with the transaction, my father confirmed. Apex recognizes that attempting to retain these relationships while divesting operational capabilities would ultimately fail. These clients choose service providers based on comprehensive capabilities, not contractual obligations. The opportunity was compelling from multiple perspectives. Acquiring the specialized division would accelerate Horizon's growth by 18 to 24 months, compared to organic expansion. It would bring established client relationships that would otherwise require years to develop. Most significantly, it would establish Horizon as an unquestioned leader in high-value logistics segments almost immediately. I would need to discuss this with my leadership team and board representatives, I noted, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries despite my personal interest. Comprehensive evaluation would require detailed operational information and transition planning considerations. Of course, my father agreed. I've prepared initial documentation outlining divisional structure, financial performance, and contractual commitments. He placed a USB drive on the table between us. This represents preliminary information sufficient for evaluation of potential interest. More comprehensive disclosure would follow expression of serious consideration. I accepted the drive, recognizing both the professional courtesy and personal significance of this exchange. My father was not merely representing Northstar Apex's interests. He was acknowledging Horizon's legitimate position as a market participant, worthy of significant transaction consideration. "Why approach me directly?" I asked, curious about the interpersonal dynamics alongside the business factors. Northstar, Apex has established investment bankers who typically manage divestiture processes. My father considered the question carefully before responding. The specialized division represents distinctive value proposition dependent on specific operational philosophy. Conventional transaction processes prioritize financial considerations that might compromise fundamental service attributes these clients require. Direct engagement with leadership capable of maintaining essential quality characteristics represents prudent stewardship of both business relationships and personal legacy. Beneath the formal business language, he was acknowledging what he had previously failed to recognize, that the specialized division's success had always depended on the people-centered logistics philosophy I had developed, not merely the transactions it processed. By approaching me directly, he was admitting both the validity of my approach and the limitations of the standardized model he had embraced through the Apex acquisition. "I appreciate your perspective," I replied, maintaining professional tone while acknowledging the personal significance. "Horizon will evaluate this opportunity with appropriate consideration for both business potential and client welfare." "I would expect nothing less," he nodded. After brief hesitation, he added, "The specialized division represents your most significant contribution to Northstar. Its continued success under your direction would preserve important aspects of our family's business legacy, regardless of corporate structure." This statement, the closest my father had ever come to explicitly recognizing my value to the family enterprise, carried complex emotional resonance. Rather than focusing on what might have been, I chose to acknowledge what could still be accomplished. "Legacy manifests through impact, not ownership," I observed. "If this transaction allows the specialized division to continue serving clients effectively while creating growth opportunities for the people who make that service possible, it represents positive evolution rather than corporate dissolution." My father's expression suggested this perspective offered welcome reframing of difficult circumstances. "Evolution has always been necessary for survival," he acknowledged, "though recognizing appropriate adaptation sometimes requires painful reassessment of established assumptions." As our dinner concluded, the conversation shifted to more practical considerations of potential transaction timing, implementation, planning, and communication strategies. Throughout these discussions, our interaction maintained professional substance while incorporating genuine recognition of shared history and values that transcended corporate boundaries. When we parted ways, my father extended his hand with unmistakable respect. "Regardless of the outcome of these discussions, your accomplishments with Horizon demonstrate remarkable capability. Building successful enterprise from concept to operational reality in mere months represents achievement worthy of acknowledgement." "Thank you," I replied, accepting both the handshake and the validation it represented. "Though success ultimately depends on the team we've assembled, individual vision matters less than collective execution. A perspective I might have benefited from embracing earlier," he observed with uncharacteristic self-reflection. Driving back to Horizon's headquarters, where the leadership team awaited briefing on this unexpected development, I considered how dramatically circumstances had shifted in just 3 months. What had begun as rejection had created opportunity for reinvention. What had appeared as setback had revealed pathway to innovation. What had felt like ending had become powerful beginning. The specialized division opportunity represented more than business transaction. It symbolized fundamental validation of the principles that had driven my professional journey. The very approach my father and brother had dismissed as unnecessarily complex and excessively relationship-focused had proven essential for success in high-value market segments. The philosophy they had rejected had become the solution they now sought. As I entered our headquarters, I was struck by the vibrant energy that permeated the space even at evening hour. Team members collaborated around project tables, engaged in animated discussions of implementation challenges and refined systems designed to serve both operational efficiency and human experience. This wasn't merely business activity, it was purposeful creation of something meaningful. The contrast with Northstar's environment was stark and revelatory. Where hierarchy had constrained innovation, collaboration now accelerated it. Where tradition had preserved limitations, experimentation now discovered possibilities. Where conformity had been valued, diversity of perspective now generated superior solutions. My father had built substantial enterprise through disciplined adherence to established practices. I was building something different, an adaptive organization designed to evolve alongside changing market needs rather than imposing standardized approaches regardless of context. Both models had validity in appropriate circumstances, but the future increasingly favored flexibility over rigidity, connection over control, and purpose beyond profit. As I prepared to brief our leadership team on the specialized division opportunity, I recognized that our success hadn't come from rejecting everything about Northstar's approach. Rather, we had preserved what worked while transforming what didn't, honoring valuable tradition while embracing necessary innovation. This balanced perspective would serve us well as we evaluated this potential transaction and navigated the growth opportunities emerging across our market. Regardless of the outcome of these specific discussions, Horizon had established itself as legitimate market force within remarkably compressed time frame. The enterprise that had begun as response to rejection had evolved into pioneering example of what logistics could become when human experience and technological capability were harmonized rather than opposed. We had demonstrated that compassionate capitalism could generate exceptional results precisely because it recognized that financial outcomes ultimately depended on human relationships. 3 years earlier, when my father had announced his decision to elevate Marcus to leadership while selling Northstar to Apex, I had felt profound disappointment at the lost opportunity to implement my vision for logistics transformation. Now I recognized that disappointment had created the necessary space for something more significant to emerge. Not just a business, but a model that could influence an entire industry. Sometimes the most profound opportunities emerge not from achievement but from apparent failure. Sometimes closed doors create necessary redirection toward greater possibility. Sometimes rejection becomes the catalyst for reinvention that transforms not just individual circumstances, but broader landscapes. Horizon Logistics represented more than competitive response to family disappointment. It embodied fundamental reimagining of what logistics could be when designed around human needs rather than mechanical efficiency. Its success validated not just my personal capabilities, but the proposition that purpose-driven enterprise could generate exceptional results precisely because it recognized the essential humanity within every transaction it facilitated. As I joined our leadership team to discuss this unexpected opportunity, I carried forward not resentment for past rejection, but appreciation for the freedom it had ultimately created. Freedom to build something authentic, meaningful, and aligned with both market needs and personal values. The path had been challenging, but had led to destination far more significant than what would have been possible within constraints of established structures. Sometimes becoming your family's biggest competitor isn't about opposition, but about demonstration, showing through achievement what might have been possible through collaboration. Sometimes the most powerful response to rejection isn't retaliation, but reinvention that transforms limitation into opportunity, disappointment into determination, and ending into remarkable new beginning. The specialized division opportunity transformed our leadership discussions from growth planning to strategic inflection point navigation. Our conference room, with its reclaimed wood table and expansive windows overlooking Portland's industrial district, became the setting for profound deliberation about Horizon's future trajectory. 8 key leaders gathered the morning after my dinner with my father, each bringing unique perspective to the evaluation. The specialized division represents immediate market credibility in pharmaceutical and medical technology sectors, Layla began, analyzing the client portfolio details from the preliminary data. These 12 anchor clients include 3 of the region's largest medical suppliers and the biotech research consortium we've been cultivating for months. The operational infrastructure is substantial, Taylor continued, reviewing the facility specifications. 4 specialized warehousing facilities with temperature-controlled environments, 23 dedicated transport vehicles, and comprehensive tracking systems for chain-of-custody verification. Developing equivalent capabilities independently would require 18 to 24 months. Personnel implications are significant, Jennifer added. 87 specialized staff, including 14 logistics engineers with advanced certifications in medical supply management. Their institutional knowledge would be extremely valuable, assuming successful cultural integration. That's my primary concern, Michael countered, his expression reflecting measured skepticism. We've built Horizon around specific operational principles and collaborative culture. Absorbing an existing team shaped by different leadership philosophy creates potential disruption to both organizations. The concern was legitimate and reflected Horizon's fundamental priority, maintaining the distinctive approach that differentiated us from traditional logistics providers. Growth that compromised our core values would ultimately undermine our competitive advantage, regardless of short-term financial benefits. What do we know about the specialized division's internal culture? I asked, probing this critical dimension. I've maintained relationships with several of their senior operations personnel, Taylor replied. According to their perspective, the specialized division has functioned almost as a separate entity within Northstar for years, primarily because their requirement for customization contradicted the standardization mandates applied elsewhere. Their operational philosophy aligns closely with Horizon's approach, Layla affirmed. Sarah essentially created both models, so the foundational compatibility should be substantial. This observation highlighted an important reality. The specialized division had been my most significant achievement at Northstar, the one area where I had been granted sufficient autonomy to implement comprehensive operational vision aligned with my fundamental principles. Its systems, protocols, and culture already reflected many of the same values now embedded in Horizon's approach. Financial dimensions are compelling but require careful analysis, noted Victor Chen, our CFO recruited from a technology background, rather than traditional finance. The acquisition price reflects premium valuation, but accretive impact on our revenue model is immediate and substantial. First, Meridian has indicated preliminary support for the necessary capital structure adjustments. Timeline considerations create additional complexity, Jennifer observed. Northstar Apex has indicated preference for accelerated transaction completion, 60 days from initial agreement to operational transfer. That compression creates implementation challenges. The discussion continued for hours, examining every dimension of the potential acquisition: strategic alignment, financial implications, operational integration, personnel considerations, and market positioning. Throughout this deliberation, I maintained facilitative leadership rather than directive authority, allowing each perspective full expression before guiding toward synthesis. We've identified significant advantages alongside substantial challenges, I summarized as discussion reached natural conclusion. The strategic alignment with our growth objectives is clear, but execution complexity cannot be minimized. Before making final determination, I believe direct assessment is essential. The team agreed that first-hand evaluation would provide critical insights impossible to derive from documentation alone. Arrangements were made for Horizon's leadership team to visit the specialized division facilities the following week, with my father securing necessary access and cooperation from current management. Remember our fundamental purpose during these evaluations, I emphasized as we prepared for the site visits. We're assessing not just operational capabilities, but potential for genuine integration. The specialized division must enhance, rather than dilute, what makes Horizon distinctive. Growth that compromises our core approach would undermine our long-term vision, regardless of immediate market expansion. The assessment visits revealed both encouraging alignment and meaningful challenges. The specialized division's operational systems demonstrated remarkable sophistication, particularly in regulatory compliance and chain of custody verification for sensitive medical products. Their facilities featured advanced technology implementation alongside thoughtful, human-centered design that resembled Horizon's approach. Most importantly, their personnel demonstrated genuine commitment to exceptional service quality and relationship-based client management. However, integration complexities were equally apparent. The division had developed certain operational habits reflecting Northstar's hierarchical structure that would require transition to Horizon's more collaborative approach. Their technology systems, while advanced, had been designed for internal efficiency rather than client transparency. Most significantly, their personnel expressed understandable anxiety about potential leadership changes following multiple disruptions during the Apex acquisition process. They've maintained exceptional operational standards despite significant organizational turbulence, Taylor observed during our private debrief. That resilience suggests fundamental capability that would thrive in more supportive environment. Their client relationships demonstrate remarkable strength, Layla added. Despite Apex's corporate transitions, they've retained 100% of their specialized accounts, evidence of service quality transcending organizational structure. The technological systems are compatible with our integration platform, Michael acknowledged, though adaptation would require significant development resources for seamless connectivity. The assessment confirmed both the opportunity's strategic value and its implementation challenges. The specialized division would accelerate Horizon's growth trajectory substantially while expanding our service capabilities in high-value market segments. However, successful integration would demand careful planning, substantial resources, and unwavering commitment to maintaining cultural coherence throughout the transition. 1 week after completing our assessment, Horizon's leadership team and board representatives gathered for final decision deliberation. The discussion was thorough but focused, with each dimension receiving appropriate consideration while maintaining orientation toward fundamental strategic questions rather than technical details. This acquisition represents transformational opportunity, I concluded, after all perspectives had been thoroughly examined. It accelerates our growth trajectory while expanding our capabilities in high-value segments. However, its success depends on execution that honors both organizations' strengths while creating integrated approach superior to either independent operation. The financial structure appears sound, acknowledged Raymond Torres from First Meridian, who represented our primary investors on Horizon's board. The capital requirements are substantial but proportionate to projected returns. The timing aligns with our investment thesis regarding market consolidation opportunities. The cultural integration represents the primary risk factor, noted Elaine Davidson, who had become a valued strategic advisor in addition to her institutional role. However, the foundational compatibility between Horizon's approach and the specialized division's operational philosophy suggests manageable adaptation rather than fundamental transformation. After comprehensive discussion, the decision was unanimous. Horizon would proceed with acquiring Northstar Apex's specialized division. The transaction would require substantial capital investment, intensive integration planning, and careful stakeholder communication. However, its strategic alignment with our fundamental vision created compelling rationale for accepting these implementation challenges. Formal negotiations commenced immediately, with Horizon submitting detailed letter of intent outlining proposed transaction structure, valuation parameters, and key conditions. Northstar Apex responded with remarkable efficiency, suggesting genuine motivation to complete this divestiture expeditiously. Within 10 days, preliminary agreement had been reached on essential terms, enabling transition planning to begin while final documentation was prepared. Throughout this process, I maintained direct communication with my father, who continued representing Northstar Apex's interests, while clearly recognizing the specialized division's optimal future lay with Horizon. Our discussions remained professionally focused while acknowledging the personal significance of this transaction for both the Reynolds family legacy and the people who had built these respective organizations. The integration planning demonstrates remarkable thoroughness, my father observed during one of our coordination meetings. Your team has identified operational connections that even our internal assessment overlooked. Comprehensive integration requires understanding both mechanical processes and human relationships, I explained. The specialized division's effectiveness has always depended on connections that transcend organizational charts or procedural manuals. He nodded thoughtfully. A perspective Apex has struggled to incorporate into their standardization approach. Their emphasis on uniformity creates efficiency in certain contexts, but compromises effectiveness where customization delivers superior value. This acknowledgement, subtle but significant, represented remarkable evolution in my father's perspective. After decades advocating standardized approaches, he was recognizing the validity of differentiated operational models for distinct market segments. The specialized division's success under my leadership had demonstrated what philosophical arguments had failed to convey: that human-centered logistics could generate superior results precisely because it recognized essential complexity that standardization inevitably oversimplified. "Have you spoken with Marcus about the transaction?" I asked, curious about my brother's perspective given his diminished role in Northstar Apex's operations. My father's expression tightened slightly. Marcus views the divestiture as temporary, strategic realignment rather than fundamental market evolution. He anticipates eventually rebuilding equivalent capabilities under standardized operational model. The assessment wasn't surprising. Throughout his career, Marcus had demonstrated remarkable confidence in his perspective despite contradictory evidence. His belief in standardization as universal solution rather than contextual approach had shaped Northstar's organizational direction during his brief leadership tenure, contributing significantly to the integration challenges that now necessitated strategic divestiture. Different operational philosophies can coexist within evolving market, I observed diplomatically. Standardization delivers value in certain segments while customization creates advantage in others. The industry ecosystem benefits from diversity of approaches addressing distinct client requirements. Wisdom that might have preserved different outcome had it been recognized earlier, my father acknowledged with uncharacteristic self-reflection. As negotiations advanced toward definitive agreement, the transaction's significance extended beyond immediate business implications. For Northstar Apex, divesting the specialized division represented tacit acknowledgement that standardization had limits in high-value market segments requiring relationship-based service models. For Horizon, acquiring these capabilities demonstrated our evolution from innovative startup to established market leader capable of transformative growth while maintaining operational integrity. For me personally, the transaction carried additional meaning, validation that the approach I had developed throughout my career represented genuine innovation rather than merely alternative preference. The specialized division's success had proven that human-centered logistics could deliver exceptional performance precisely because it recognized the essential human relationships underlying effective supply chain management. Now, this approach would find expanded expression through integration with Horizon's technological platform and collaborative culture. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.